Despite your more legal troubles, we'll miss you greatly. Rest in peace to one of the greatest documentarians around.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once back to another edition of the Skinny E-Media podcast, as we call it, BBFC versus MPAA. Up to episode, I've lost count to be honest, but hey, we're getting
Number 43.
We're getting from 43, is it? That's all good. It looks like we're being productive. I am Rob Bavister. Used to be called Bobatron, but I'm not on Twitter anymore. So isn't that nice? I've always known as Citizen Snips on YouTube, and with me I've got Mark, or basically Skinny E-Media himself, or as what we call ourselves, and that's the off. And so we're here to talk about possibly every guy's favorite genre of movies, be it when we were little kiddies, right up to when we're grumpy old men. It is simply hasta la vista, baby. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. That's about as good as an impression as I can do. Of course, to want action movies. Because let's face it, we got to talk about action movies. Just because everyone loves them, or at least every guy, well, most birds love them as women love as well. And of course, when it comes to film ratings and censorship, they have basically, along with horror, have done the most irking, and comedy, I guess. Yes. So, get your grenade strapped. Let's lock and load, because no one's made that joke before. And let's sink our teeth into, or shall I say, make a lead injection into today's topic, that being action movies. So Mark, or Fuckface, what's your favorite action movie?
Small Soldiers. It was one of my first ones I saw when I was growing up. I guess you could say Hercules, the Disney film of '97, but let's just say Small Soldiers because it's a bit of a safer bet.
Shut it!
Oh, that's from the background.
Fair enough, then. I suppose, fair enough. Not really what I'd call in as an action movie. Well, nothing not Hercules. Small Soldiers I kind of get. My one is, of course, Die Hard. I've loved that movie ever since, I was a kid. And let's face it, it's considered many to be the ultimate and greatest ever pinnacle of action movies. Well, that and Terminator 2. And of course, it is, it's a typical R rating in the USA. Was an 18 over here. It's now been dropped to a 15, which is about time. But no, Small Soldiers, is a good film. I've seen it a few times, never saw it at the cinema, even though I could have. PG-13 in the US, PG in the UK, I think PG in Australia as well. Probably quite an unintentional period piece if you watch it back now, when you see all the how all the people, how everyone's dressed in it, and all the 90s get up everyone has, as well as watching the likes of Dennis Leary and David Cross in it.
Well, it certainly passes that test there. And I remember seeing it at Virgin Cinemas in Watford, one of those places, and I have very fond memories of that. The whole family came along. I was just happy to see all the sort of toys being violent and massacring on people and going a bit wild. It is a bit sad to say, though, outside of the rating matter, because it was PG, most Gen Z people or Gen Alpha are going to see the 12 on the DVD cover and think, oh, I can't go see it. Well, let me remind you that the special features on the DVD are the reason why that was a 12, not PG. Just to break any confusion for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, because if you want to, I'm on the BBFC website looking it up. I'm trying to find anything that might get it. Because bearing in mind, it hasn't been rated by the BBFC since 2000. It'll probably be bumped up to a 12A in due time anyway. I mean, let's face it, a lot of 90s PGs were, again, because most of them are PG-13 in America, or some ones that weren't even then PG-13 in America have been bumped up there, like Galaxy Quest and Casper, and that's yeah, well, that's all as weird as can be. Me, how? I mean, do you have a favorite? What the Americans would call R-rated action movie?
I'll give a toss-up between 3 different films here. All of them have an 18 certificate. The Raid, Crank High Voltage, Hardcore Henry. Now, I know those are quite strange ones to try to pick from, but I have my reasons.
Yeah, okay, well, let's hear them.
Well, for starters, The Raid, I always watch it as an exercise routine, and the way they choreograph the heavy martial arts sequences in that one are just phenomenal. It's an Indonesian martial arts film at best, but it's certainly one of the most violent around. Raid 2 even pushes the envelope in terms of blood and gore even further. In terms of Hardcore Henry, it is one of the most violent films I have ever seen. Even at R, it really pushes the envelope. So I even heard they had to trim a few bits of violence just to get it to R. This is based on hearsay from a Reddit AMA conference that Ilya Naishula did. And yes, it is a Russian film, but it's not pro-Putin or anything like that. The guy actually said, we condemn the Ukraine war. Crank High Voltage is a guilty pleasure of mine, and that it's so outrageous, so violent, so offensive, so vulgar, sexually charged. You always have to wonder, did this pass through committee? I can tell you right now, it doesn't. If you thought saying the words, do I have the word cunt on my forehead? Well, there's a hell of a lot more than that. There's like about 8 or 7 C words, full-blown sex. A guy who's being tortured in the genitals. The vacuum. Someone cutting his nipple off, and other types of extreme violence, and even there's yellow face. I'm sick in the head.
I mean, I saw Crank High Voltage at the cinema. I didn't see the first one at the cinema. I just saw that on DVD. I did laugh every time the bit where he says, "Well, have I got cunt on my forehead?" and everything. And then he said it because cunt several times in the sequel. Maybe one time when he tried to jump over a railing and ended up getting wedged right in the nuts and everything. And he goes, "Cunt." I found that hilarious. But yeah, I suppose we are. I mean, let's see. Crank and Crank Lodge are very, very good at. Sorry, what was I going to say? Very action movies. They really do just keep it moving in it. Keep it moving. And the Raid is good just for how well it's filmed in it. Where it's filmed, it's much like how John Wick is filmed, or the Netflix Daredevil series, where these long unbroken shots without any quick cuts or shaky cams, which basically plagued action movies during the 2000s, which almost made people think that action movies started to suck, or at least not be as good as they used to be. I mean, it was quite telling when the action movies started to get represented by the likes of Taken and whatnot, where they just hired someone who blatantly couldn't do half the stunts, so they would just get some stunt double in to do it and just film it in such a way that you can never see what's going on. It's the same with just about all of Steven Seagal's direct-to-video or direct-to-DVD output in the past, 20 to 25 years now, where it's just, is he even in the same room as the people who he's supposedly fighting? Is he even doing? He's just standing there and waving his hands and letting the camera do all the work. It's a far cry from what we used to have, but at least action movies have come back. And later on today, on this date of the 24th of May 2024, just in case anyone's listening, which is when we're recording this, in case anyone's listening later, which of course is when you would be. I will be going to see Mad Max Furiosa at the cinema, and I really did like Mad Max Fury Road. In fact, while we're on the subject, I know I'm bogarting this conversation a bit, but I'll get the point. It was when Mad Max Fury Road came out, as well as John Wick the year before, and Olympus has fallen to a lesser extent the year back because all three had R ratings in America and 15 ratings over here. John Wick brought in actual stunt work and a steady cam and everything, and Mad Max Fury Road brought back in practical effects. It made me think to myself, "Oh yeah, action movies are back." Yeah, because they remind me of stuff I used to grow up watching. But anyway, I've talked long enough. It's back to you, Mark.
No, but you're making a good point there. I know between us, Rob Bavister's the more action-oriented person versus me. Usually, the type of action movies that Jerry tend to like, Jerry tend to be either here or there. You know, everything from sort of family-friendly stuff like Small Soldiers and The Incredibles, and Hercules, Disney, all the way to sort of hardcore shit like I said, Hardcore Henry and Crank High Voltage, which you should never show to your girlfriend. You shouldn't show to your wife or your kids. They're absolutely bonkers.
Well, Crank High Voltage.
Did forget to say.
I wouldn't say any problem showing it to your girlfriend. When I went to see Crank High Voltage, two of the people I went with were my mate and his girlfriend.
Well, I'll put it this way. You know, it's quite a very male gaze type of view on sexual business. And there's a scene where they do the dirty in a sort of horse track. It goes on for quite a while, and they were actually. I'm assuming the only reason why they didn't get the NC-17, which thank goodness they kept everything at R, they got quite away with quite a few things at R, was that they blurred up the genitals. But at least you get to see Jason Statham's testicles for a brief flash as it's being suctioned off with a vacuum cleaner, which I always laugh. I know it's an action movie, but I also view it as a really dark comedy. And that sort of plays in the both worlds for me because I also like Natural Born Killers, which is also an action film. But people don't think of it that way. It's more weird, dark satire, but it works as comedy.
It's not really I wouldn't say it's an action movie. And while it may not have been Crank 2 may not have been NC-17 in America, it was an 18 in Britain and it was an R18 plus in Australia. So I mean, yeah, it was pushing those boundaries.
Oh, certainly there. And even if you took out all the violence and sex, the use of the C word, that's almost the level that it uses is almost unfathomable for an American movie. I'm guessing because it's Jason Statham and he's British, and it's not sort of gender specific, except when he says, "Do you speak Cantonese?" Replace the A with the U, and you get the idea. That's it.
Yeah.
But still, it's certainly more by American standards. Like, oh, what else do you say? But that's just my take on it. I mean, there are other action films I do like as well. If you're talking about superhero films, it's The Incredibles. But you probably would laugh at me because that's a family film. It's an animation. Spy movies, I like The Kingsman and Grimsby. But I don't know if those are more comedies than action films. I'll let you decide on that one. And in martial arts, I guess Rush Hour.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, anything that goes with martial arts can be considered an action movie, and yeah, action and comedy have been mixed quite a bit in the past, and like in Grimsby. Hell, one of my favorite films growing up was a nice blend, but was a nice and an amazing blend between action and comedy, of course, and that was The Mask.
I never really viewed that as an action movie. Really, always more as a comedy, but because it's super heroic and superheroes generally have
there's a lot of
lots of violence. I get it.
There's a lot of shooting going on it. You would definitely qualify. There were definitely some definitely a lot of action scenes. If you for a film that wouldn't necessarily be considered an action movie, especially that bit at the end where there's gangsters have a shootout at the nightclub.
Oh yeah, well I certainly remember it from my days rewatching the tape over and over and over again. Well, I take it from BBC 1 or 2. And yeah, you are right from previous podcasts of before. it's a bit on the violent side for PG because it has that sort of crime gangland setting, which you would think for a second you're almost watching a Scorsese film or De Palma, not really done by Chuck Russell with Jim Carrey in it, but that's a different story.
Well, a lot of Americans said it was a very hard PG-13 for those reasons. So you can imagine the bewilderment that it was PG here, yet Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber were both 12s. Meaning, as a 9-year-old back in '94, I could see the first one, but I could see The Mask, but not those other two. So that made sense. Not.
Well, you can blame Furman on that one.
I do.
If it was to 12, I don't think I would have had the possibility of seeing it as young as I did, and I probably wouldn't have appreciated it as well. Had it been like a proper 12 type of film, because at the time I didn't see Ace Ventura, I didn't see Dumb and Dumber. I saw Dumb and Dumber a few years after I saw Mask at someone's place. It was back like in '02 or something. And I just didn't connect with those as well as I did with Mask, because also I like the Mask because it has the cartoon element. It's very, very silly and cartoonish, and that's probably why I liked it. And then, years later, I saw Roger Rabbit, which had that same sort of element with the film noir, weird, kooky setting, and I'm like, yeah! But Roger Rabbit, that's more sort of crime thriller, animation, comedy, not really superhero action.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of gunfights and machine guns being blasted and everything, which, I don't think it would really qualify as well as The Mask did. And of course, I don't know, action movies have been quite controversial in terms of a ratings boards and everything. I mean, the MPAA hasn't been quite so heavy-handed with it. Well, okay, maybe it was a bit. I know we all know about the situation regarding RoboCop and how that had to be submitted. What was it, like 12 times before he finally got away with an R rating? Because because they kept slapping.
I try not to bring up RoboCop for obvious reasons.
That's okay. I mean, it's a great film. I love it. So, I mean, eventually he managed to get through with an R rating, but they did come down here on that. They said it was unusual for an action movie to be rated X for violence or anything. Yeah, at the time anyway, because now we've got the full on uncut director's cut now, which is the proper version. But of course, there was also heavy issues with I think Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger, both directed by Rennie Harlin, both had to be cut down to avoid an X rating as well.
Yeah, that one's quite unusual.
That was unusual, yeah. I mean, I wish again, I say cut down to avoid X rating. I'm already more NC-17 as it was by that point, or at least with Cliffhanger would have been. Wouldn't mind Wouldn't mind if they would release the uncut versions there, but hey ho. But of course, I mean, the BBFC, they were always quite strict on action movies, but oh boy, after Hungerford in 1987, James Furman went fucking nuts. I mean, you could discuss ad infinitum how the first two Rambo films, or First Blood as they're called, were both uncut 15s. And for Rambo 3 to not only have to be rated 18, but still have to be freaking cut because it was a Rambo films that were considered Oh, sorry, I got terrible gas. That were responsible for held responsible for massacre in the first place.
Well, yeah, at the time, they find ways to blame on certain films causing violence and upheaval. We don't have quite that effect to this day, unless you sort of replace certain films with video games, so to speak. But yes, I am familiar with the controversy behind the Rambo films. But when you look at them in all fairness, it's a bit on the silly side, really, because number 4 and number 5 are so violent, so graphic. I do have to wonder, that was a big leap you've seen Last Blood, right? Or Rambo 4,
I have.
where he's
Yes,
in
I have.
Burma.
Yeah, I've seen both of those.
And even at that time, it was like 2008 or something, you couldn't even get away with as much gore or violence at the R level like you could with Rambo 4, which had people being openly decapitated and someone's throat is ripped out. And really sort of strong scenes of like dismemberment or people's bodies exploding. And even when I first saw that, or the clips isolated, I thought that was one of the most violent films I ever saw. And then I saw Last Blood. I thought that scene where he ripped someone's collarbone off of his shoulder, that was almost nauseating in a way that I sort of harken back to that Switchblade Romance, Haute Tension film, which had some violence that was pretty nauseating to watch.
Yeah, that was a very violent film, Switchblade Romance.
It's
Or
horror, so
Tension,
we
as
won't.
it's called. And at least that one did get its NC set or its NC-17. God, obviously, Last Blood didn't get an NC-17, or if it did, it was probably cut down to get rid of it. There's no sign of it on IMDb. Yeah, but Last Blood was 18 here and R18 plus in Australia, and well, just says 18A in Canada, but not R. But never mind. Yeah, most other countries gave it their equivalent of an 18 rating. France just a 12. But no, it was a surprisingly violent film. It was crap as well. But then again, it was just I didn't see any point for the film to be made, to be honest. It was like 90 minutes long, and the last 10 minutes of it were just a montage of all the the events of all the entire Rambo series, including, and I shit you not, the movie we'd just been watching. So, yeah. But then if you've seen the film, you'd probably know that anyway. But good God.
I saw it in the cinema. Rambo
So, yeah.
Last Blood was the first one I saw in the cinemas. I didn't see Rambo 4 because I was a bit young for that. But it was mainly because of the controversy surrounding it being racist or having some sort of xenophobic message that all Mexicans are rapists and out to kidnap your daughter. Now, take that as you will, but there is a thread, just like with Western films, where you'll find more sort of hyper-masculine conservative politics in a lot of these types of films, be they indirect or quite direct. People even said that about the London Has Fallen movie with Gerard Butler and Morgan Freeman. I saw that in the cinema because it came out at an unfortunate time when there was a lot of terror attacks occurring in France and London and so on and so forth. It was horrible. So, like I always see films for controversy, I did it with just that. But anyone who's going to be radicalized by London Has Fallen probably is already radicalized anyways. Yeah, it's got that sort of conspiratorial element. Although probably toned down a little bit from like an Oliver Stone.
Well, sorry. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a particularly well-timed film, I have to admit. I mean, the first film, which came out free, is which when North Korea kept talking shit on, and of course, as North Korea has taken over the White House in a way which is just no fucking way could happen in real life. Second one is a bunch of Islamic terrorists somehow seize control of all of London in a way and assassinate the world leaders of every single Western country. Again, completely just no. The third one is more of a. Sorry, what happened to the third one? Just more of a. He has to go on the run and clear his name and everything. One of those types. And of course, there's a subplot about there being a false accusation of Russian intelligence. So you could sort of tell who the target audience were.
Well, there's a certain degree of joy to be had watching these sort of movies and sort of finger pointing. Oh, this is what they're referring to. Oh, this is what they're talking about there. I did it with Civil War. I did it with the Purge films. I did it with the Olympus and London. I haven't seen Angel Has Fallen, but I would presume it's probably similar to In the Line of the Fire.
I don't think it is actually. I can't. Actually, what the hell did happen in Angel Has Fallen? Angel Has Fallen. I can't even remember, to be honest. I only watched it once, and it was a few years back, and I just kind of just forgot most of what happened. Gee, that's bad. Now that says more about the movie itself, if you ask me.
Well, these are movies most people would just watch on TV or streaming with a can of beer and some Doritos. Oh wait, wrong country, not Doritos. Walker's prawn cocktail.
No, I mean we eat Doritos in Britain, dude. Think you should be aware of that.
Yeah, no, I know. I see it at Tesco and Sainsbury's stands. Get on discount with your Nectar card. Sorry, that was a bit promotional right there.
Yeah, a little bit.
But nevertheless,
no,
well, I know I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I forgot to even include my favorite vigilante film and favorite animated action. I know vigilante-wise, well, Fallen Down, that's more of a thriller. But you could say those Purge films, particularly number 3, number 4, and number 5, they are action movies, which I've hinted at in previous podcasts before. And if you're talking about animation, well, it would be Incredibles. But if you're talking about Japanese anime, I guess you could bring up Afro Samurai, which is actually one of the first 18 certificate DVDs I ever owned. And probably one of the first 18 films I ever saw.
Oh, nice.
I know. How badass was I? Must have been like 16
very
or 15.
much so. Very much so, Mark. I don't know how you walk around with bollocks that big.
Well, I'm about 1 meter 91 tall, but I'm not as masculine as you are. So I'll let you take over on this department with the guns, the facial hair, beer, and all
Well,
that.
that's great. Referring back to the Furman's attitude towards action movies, because yeah, we saw the case with Rambo 3, and of course, loads of other R-rated, American R-rated action movies were subject to heavy cuts, at least to get a 15 anyway. We had Tango and Cash got mutilated. There was Lethal Weapon 2, but then Lethal Weapon 2 wasn't even going to be uncut at 18 when it's released on video anyway. There was Die Hard 2, Point Break. Well, not only was the violence cut down, but they cut down all the F-bombs as well. Then, of course, in 1993, we had Cliffhanger. We have brought up Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger, but have to bring up Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger again, because Cliffhanger, they admit that not even did it only did have to be cut down, well, in terms of violence and bad language, to get its 15 rated. They even admitted that due to the scene where Michael Rooker's character gets beaten up, it wouldn't even be allowed to be uncut at 18, which is
that's just bizarre.
Oh yeah,
that's bizarre.
And of course, there's Lethal Weapon 4 and Die Hard 3 were also heavily cut for their 15 ratings. Probably just basically after the Hungerford and Mary Whitehouse went on her typical bitch streak again, pissing and moaning about how violence in media encourages violence in real life. He bought into it and decided that simply he had to just take the scissors to every last action movie it was. And it had to be during the time when we were living in the golden age of action movies. It was such a shit. And one of the big examples I use of the chillaxing of the BBFC ever since Furman's departure was, of course, the Bad Boys films, because Bad Boys 1, which was released in 1995 under Furman, got an 18 rating. Then fast forward 8 years later, 2003, you get Bad Boys 2, which is released long after it left, and that got a 15 rating. And that was arguably much more violent and much stronger.
Well, I am aware from hot Fuzz, which is a movie we both are fans of. It does sort of hint at that level of madness. I think even Hot Fuzz took the piss out of some of the gorier moments from Bad Boys 2 that I remember. It's been a long time since I've seen Bad Boys 2, but I take your word for it. And that also combined with films like Dog Soldiers and a few others show that 15 movies were now getting a lot more violent, if not even gorier, than the 18s of yore. And that still, even to this day, throws me off a bit because, you look at all these, 15 action films like Sabotage or the John Wicks, Equalizers.
First
And
two
then,
Equalizers were cut from their 15s.
oh, I'm aware. I mean, I was in America at the time, so I saw them uncut. But it did throw me off a little bit because I was like, oh, that scene with the corkscrew was quite intense. And then there was a very sustained, very brutal beating that they said, oh, we didn't cut that. But if you go on movie censorship and cutting edge, they did trim it to some extent. And you could certainly tell. I mean, in all fairness, I treat those films as 18s anyways because they are quite brutal. And number one also has that weird child prostitution subplot, which makes the film a bit creepy and a bit Taxi Driver-ish.
What, the first Equalizer?
Yes. Well, Chloe Moretz is in it, which every pedophile seems to love. I don't
All right.
know why.
I've only seen Equalizer once. I can't remember exactly what the plot was. I just remember it being remarkably brutal. I remember watching it on Netflix, and even though it said 15, because it was rated 15, it showed us the completely uncut version, so that was just glorious.
Well, ding dong. Oh, at this point, we live in a world where streaming services don't have to necessarily comply with a UK censorship law or BBFC codes and guidelines, to where, and this is even worse, there's algorithms involved. You can have a film and it will say like 14 plus or 16 plus. It could be a version that's a hell of a lot stronger than what would typically pass at a film at that level, and that always still throws me off a little bit. I would presume, had Monkey Man still remained as a Netflix release, they probably would have, gave it like a 18 plus. But let's just say if it was 16 plus, you'd be left wondering a little bit like, oh, that scene where you see someone's throat being stabbed and there's blood gushing everywhere and being brutally beaten. Like some sort of knife pocket thing contained in the shoe. Being like, oh, that was quite nasty. I will speak on Monkey Man a little bit because there has been some rumors that the film has been censored, but this was more an issue to do with the Indian market. Bollywood, they thought some of the politics of the film was a bit too on the nose, so they had to change the flag from like BJP yellow, which is Narendra Modi's party, to red. Red implies communist or left wing, and then they took out all the sexual assault stuff in the version that was going to be released by Universal Pictures and Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Pictures. So we will probably never know if there's an uncut version of it that has all the horrible rape stuff and overt politics that could be lost or released a very long time.
Well, it may have been toned down a bit for the Indian release, yeah, for that very reason. But God knows if anything was cut out for our releases. I don't think there was. Well, at least the ratings boards never said anything. And yes, it's true that what was I going to say? It's true that the streaming service don't have to deal with BBFC ratings. I don't know. In no way do I consider that to be a bad thing at all. I do like the fact there's a bit more freedom there. Of course, I was mentioning how the 15s, ever since the start again. You mentioned those films earlier on that were starting to show that the 15 certificate was getting a lot stronger and everything. And I was like, yeah, it was, and it has been. I mean, to this point, I'm starting to think it's something we should have got used to. I mean, I would have thought someone of your age would have, and born at a time you were, Mark, would have been used to the idea of the 15 just being assigned for strong content, because I figured out, now a 15 has really started to increase to get to the level of, almost get to the level of America's R rating. And let's face it, the way I see it, those two are the equivalent ratings. So, I mean, I do expect quite a bit from it. Took a lot back in the day of Furman for an R-rated movie, especially an R-rated action movie, to get through the PG. Start again. It took a lot for an R-rated action movie to get away with a 15 rating under Furman. When I say a lot, I mean it was not like it wasn't likely it was going to get through an uncut 15, especially after Hungerford. It was quite surprising that Under Siege and I guess Speed was quite tame, so I mean that no issue there. But I think the case of Under Siege, it was uncut 15 at the cinema, but cut a bit on video. Of course, Con Air did get an uncut 15 at the cinema, but was bumped up to an 18 on video just because. Then, of course, there was a Rock. I forgot to mention, did have to be cut down to get its 15 rating. I also forgot to mention it. So did Terminator 2. That should give an idea of how ridiculously zealous they are, because let's face it, that by modern day R-rated action movie standards, the film's quite tame.
Well, you actually brought up a great point, because when I do look at quite a few 80s and 90s action films that did pass with an R rating, some of them are almost as violent or as bloodless as the PG-13s you see nowadays. I mean, if you took it from face value, is there really a great deal of difference in terms of blood and gore or body count between Casino Royale and Lethal Weapon? Or, to put it better ways, between Terminator and Casino Royale? Or Bourne Identity versus Matrix? And Bourne Identity came out 3 years after Matrix.
Yeah, Matrix was incredibly...
You have to wonder...
Okay, with Casino Royale or any Bond film and Lethal Weapon, obviously the difference is basically the impact of the violence. Like the PG-13 or 12A standard, you have people getting shot, but you won't. You have the violence, but you won't have the consequences of violence. Like you see people shot, you won't see any blood squibs or blood spurts, so you won't see any injury detail. Whereas something like Lethal Weapon, you would do. You'd see like basically impact shots and the blood squibs and everything. But then again, the Matrix doesn't have a huge amount of that. The only scene in the Matrix where there's a lot of injury detail or impact or anything is in the hallway shootout with those security guards, because they're wearing white shirts. So of course the blood shows up more.
This is true. From my memory, because it's been a while since I've seen it. It's actually one of my first 15 certificate DVDs I ever owned. But I didn't buy it underage like I did with Ghost in the Shell. But beside the point, that's probably the only thing I can think of where I did see certain focus on blood. But compared to some of those other ones, it doesn't have quite the level of language that a lot of the radar films have. There isn't really much in the way of sex or nudity. I know number 2 does, but the first one didn't. I don't remember there being any drugs. And the violence was more or less what I would call some moderate to strong level, like stuff that most teenagers probably can handle without blinking an eye on. I would say, and I'm probably going to go to hell for this, Casino Royale is a much more offensive film than Matrix, even though, Bond, spies, they're very popular. But most people, either whether they're turned on or they're disturbed by that torture scene where Bond's naked, that certainly did a number on my head than watching someone, how do I put that word? They tried to do limbo. How low can you go? But when the bullets fly off, that infamous scene from The Matrix.
The Matrix is incredibly stylized, but that was the fashion of a time, whereas Casino Royale, as was more a fashion at the time, was very gritty, very dark, very sort of grimy and down and dirty and everything, gritty and realistic. But again, that was just the fashion of the time. So yeah, I guess it is slightly more impactful. I mean, this has been quite a focal point of attention because when you were staying at mine, we watched that episode of Cutting Edge that focused on Casino Royale, if you remember.
Yes, I do. Actually, I've seen it since, mainly just for a laugh. And
okay, well,
you do have to wonder how on earth did that pass through? But go on.
Well, on both sides of Atlantic, the film was cut down to get the respective ratings of 12A and PG-13. Now, the BBFC took umbrage with the torture scene, and that was when it was cut down. Everything else was left in. The MPAA had no problems with the torture scene and left that completely untouched, but took umbrage with the bathroom fight scene at the beginning and the stairwell fight scene later on. And as such, edits were made. The thing is, though, is that like the MPAA made some heavy edits to both those two scenes that I've mentioned, whereas the BBFC made a very little change to the torture scene later on. They just removed one swing and a frame where he rests the knotted rope over Bond's shoulder and leers over him. Now, on the surface, this can make the BBFC look better. Say, hey, well, they're less zealous. They didn't demand so much footage be removed, whereas the MPA were too heavy-handed. And that makes... And yeah, there is an argument to be made for that. But at the same time, the also argument to be made is like, well, at least the MPA cuts actually made a difference. I mean, they actually did significantly reduce the scenes. And there's a difference now between a PG-13 rated Casino Royale and the uncut, well, R-rated or unrated version. Whereas, like, for all the difference that... With the BBFC cuts, basically, all the difference they may as well have passed the whole thing 12 and have done with it.
Well, I suppose, based upon your logic, but I can tell you right now, if they kept it as uncut as they did, even with the few trims that they did make, they still would have got complaints. I think that film that year was probably the most complained about in 2006, which is pretty much not surprising there. To change from the sort of silliness of the Pierce Brosnan type movies, a sort of throwback to Timothy Dalton. And yes, there was a bit of a concern because at the time when I first saw it, I was quite homophobic, that I thought that scene was somehow going to arouse me or turn me on. And I didn't want to, see a scene like that because it, uses both sexualized imagery and violence in a weird sort of way that should never be in a 12 film. You can only show in 15 and 18 films. And that's probably why I overreact to that film as much as I do. And that's why you always hear me talk about it as alongside in the same camp as naked man whipping himself, albino, little girl is abused in Japanese anime, or those Think ads with the people being run over by cars. I got traumas in my head. You gotta help me.
Yeah, I that's not really within my that's not really within my merit mark. In fact, I don't know whose merit it is within because fuck me, there's too much to unpack there. The only point I was getting is that the BBFC got a lot of complaints as it was for Casino Royale. Clearly, if they really wanted to make an impact and avoid complaints, they logically should have actually cut more, but they didn't. So what I'm saying was that the cuts they made were just so inconsequential that there was no point to them. I mean, when you finally get the uncut 15 rated Casino Royale on Blu-ray, and you're on an impression of, oh, wicked, this is going to be the uncut version, what I didn't get to see at cinema, and all you get is that extra bit of footage. Is like, well, what the fuck was the point in that?
No, but even I felt that way when I saw Edward Scissorhands and Men in Black uncut, because for so long they were PG films, but when I did see a little bit more beating in Edward Scissorhands, where he beats Edward, it kind of paled in comparison to the scene where you see the villain gets stabbed and there's blood everywhere when he falls to his death. That was certainly more gruesome than watching Edward being beaten with a stick. And then Men in Black, the whole you insensitive prick was in you insensitive jerk versus Brits. So I kind of get the logic a little bit behind there, but it messes with my head a bit because I actually prefer films to be uncut. Whether they show something that's illegal, it's a different story, but let the audience decide. But also rate it appropriately, because I think part of the problem that I had with Casino Royale was that, not because it's a 12A, you can bring persons quite young in a film like that, and I can only imagine what was going through any parent's mind when they saw that torture scene and him saying, "How the whore's gonna know you've been scratching up my balls?" Or Dark Knight, for instance, where a Joker is threatening people with knives in their mouths. Oh, that is quite intense. I would be okay with Dark Knight being 15, but I know if I say that, you'll think I'm a Daily Mail supporter. So I'm going to not talk on that.
Well, I would think some rather extreme. Well, yeah, I have my thoughts about that. But you forget, it's all very good saying like the BBFC get complaints about films being too strong for a certain rating, but if they rate it too high, and then parents can't take their kids to see these certain films they want to take them to go see, I don't know, they're going to be inundated with complaints. Me and Tom spoke about this on the his 12A podcast about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's like, yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 may have been a bit strong. Might thought it'd be a bit strong for a 12A. I don't think it was, by the way. But I mean, like, come on, parents, you don't want to be told you can't take your kids to see Guardians of the Galaxy. So just, buck up. Granted, if they felt this violence was too strong for a 12A, I suppose the distributors could have always reduced it to get a lower rating. Doctor Strange, of course, the issue is mostly with the horrific content. But again, A, it was 12A, and B, it's not an action movie, so it's neither here nor there right now.
No, but those superhero films are mostly action-oriented. So you are right on many respects there. I mean, I could have brought up Spider-Man, which, after Wild Wild West, is the second 12 film I saw underage before 12 became 12A. And I always have fond memories of that film, even though I think, now looking at it, Darkman was a better film than Spider-Man in Sam Raimi's catalog. But I know there's some rumors going about that the film was actually considered a strong 12, to where they almost thought, maybe this should be a 15. But if they did that, they would have got even more complaints. I personally think it's fine at 12. But I think most of the issues that they felt was because of the ending sequence between Green Goblin and Peter Parker fighting, and they thought some of the blows and kicks were too crunchy and a bit too brutal.
Well, according to that GNC Cutting Edge TV series, the reason for Spider-Man's 12 rating is not because of any of the particular violence. Of course, if it was any particular violence or sound effects, that would always just be reduced to get a PG. It was for thematic elements. It was a scene at the beginning where he beats up the robber, and a scene at the end where he beats up the goblin, which had too strong a revenge theme, which was too problematic for a PG. That's the reason.
Well, they are right. I mean, Peter Parker's dad dies, and so he takes out vengeance against the world, but it has that sort of sci-fi fantasy element that sort of distance it from, let's say, Death Sentence or Death Wish, or any sort of old school vigilante film that certainly wears 18 on its sleeve. So I kind of get that, but you have to remember also that at that time, until at least early 2010s, a film could be even an 18 just based on sadistic relish and vigilante theme alone. That's how you got films like Law Abiding Citizen getting 18s. Nowadays, you can show pretty graphic revenge films at 15. Well, that explains God Bless America for a second. Or the John Wicks.
Well, yeah. Well, that's because they're more stylized action films, and not quite so what we call sadistic in theme. I mean, my most recent time at the first Death Wish was rated by the BBFC was 2006. I mean, that could be overdue for a re-rating to 15. I reckon next time. I mean, I haven't seen the film, so I couldn't fucking say for sure. But I mean, that could easily be. Again, I just don't know. It goes without saying that most of these 18-rated action movies, or at least a couple of 15s under Furman, have all been re-rated with completely uncut 15 ratings, including both Lethal Weapon 2, which was cut for its 18 on video, Cliffhanger, which they originally said wouldn't be uncut at 18, and Eraser, which, oh boy, that's a tumultuous time with the BBFC. It was released 18 at cinema, even with cuts to some like strikes to the head and knife play. When released on video to try and get some more sales, they wanted it down to a 15, and it was fucking mutilated. I mean, it was practically to the point of might be even being unwatchable. And again, now it is a completely uncut 15 rating. So to say that BBFC have come on leaps and bounds since Furman just fucked off and left them to it is to say would be an understatement. They are, we've come a long way, baby, to say the least.
Hey, that's a Fatboy Slim album. Weirdly enough, you just made my day. But yes, I actually am thinking about it. Some of those films I'm a big fan of at 15 and 18, like the Purge films and Kingsman and Hardcore Henry, Raid, Crank High Voltage. I could only imagine what Furman's response would have been to those particular titles. I know he certainly would not have liked Crank High Voltage. He probably might have even said it's rejected because there's no context, it's all random, it's just violent and crude for the sake of being violent and crude. Oh, he would have come heavy on that one.
To be fair, he never actually rejected that. I don't think he ever rejected an action movie. He just demanded he would demand cuts. Of course, another movie I've just been reminded about that was subject to trimmings on both sides of the Atlantic, and it's a film me and my brother have watched so many times. Oh, we love this film, and I think it's a classic Arnie film from the 80s, and maybe you've seen it. I don't know. Commando.
I actually have never seen Commando, but I do know you can take your pants
You're missing
off
out.
while watching it.
Have you never heard the phrase, let off some steam, Bennett?
No, but I'm familiar with the one where it says, don't give up your day job from Last Action Hero. I'll talk about that one in a moment, but go on about Commando.
Well, in its completely uncut form, which has been released on DVD over here, it is it was given an X rating in America. So that was toned down to get an R rating. That R rating was then sent to the rest of the world, and when the BBFC had it, they demanded even further cuts just to give it an 18 rating. So yeah, you can imagine. Well, just how shitty they were. Of course, it's still an 18 now, of course, in its fully uncut version, even with the American X material in. So, I mean, at least we can say, well, we're getting a fucking full-on proper version, and it's clearly something that would at least makes it feel like it's actually earned the 18 rating, knowing that it had the X in America, or NC-17 as it would be now. I believe everywhere else in the world, or the first world, pretty much gave it the equivalent rating. But no, it is an action movie classic. It's almost just like it looks like, seems like self-parody of just or an affectionate self-parody of 80s action movies, because at the end, where he's just running around a bad guy's estate, just gunning down wave after wave of bad guys, like it's stripped down into a singlet, carrying a gun that's pretty much half the size of himself. All the while, the bad guys are shooting at him and just not even hitting, even though he's like even though you shouldn't be able to miss him from a mile away due to his size. Is just glorious. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, but then again, most of these action movies were. I mean, if you actually check out most of their tomato meter ratings, I mean, they are just absolutely delicious, wonderfully ridiculous. I think that's what set the likes of Die Hard. That's what set Die Hard apart from most of them, because that was such a well-made and well-constructed film, and the acting was great, the writing was great, and of course, Bruce Willis's John McClane character, rather than this invincible muscle band Uberman or superhuman Uber hero, was just a regular everyday schmo who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And no wonder that spawned so many imitators in the following decade.
Well, unfortunately for Bruce Willis, he won't be able to relive his glory days because of his aphasia condition that has left him more or less destabilized, where he can't even speak or respond as well. So my heart goes out to the Willis and Moore family as he tries to overcome this horrible disease. But yes, I would say as far as Bruce Willis films are concerned, Die Hard has its good moments. I do like Die Hard with a Vengeance a little bit more because it has that sort of buddy comedy angle to where I was told by a source that it was actually going to be a Lethal Weapon script, but then they altered it to make it into Die Hard at the last minute, which probably explains why you got the white man, the black man sort of taking jibes at one another. And Die Hard actually works as a comedy because Bruce Willis is hilarious. And he's also very foul-mouthed. There's a lot more swearing in these action movies than there was in most action films at the time, unless it's like Scorsese.
Totally.
Fucking this, motherfucking that. Shut the fuck up. You get the idea. But I'll go back to Arnie a little bit. I don't expect me to say this, but my two favorite Arnie films are Kindergarten Cop and Last Action Hero. Now, Last Action Hero being 15 is really, really silly. That could have easily have been a 12. It could have even been a PG. Considering it's less violent than Jaws or Princess Mononoke. And then with Kindergarten Cop, I saw that on telly like back in 06 or 05, and I was a bit miffed as to why this was a 15, because it looked like a kid movie.
Oh, it's actually a 12. It was a 12 at a cinema anyway. Oh no, apparently it was cut for a 12. Though, having said that, so maybe not, because apparently it was cut by 19 seconds for a 12 certificate.
Well, at the time, I kind of get that, but that was a strange movie to watch on the telly because they aired it at a time where they thought, it's probably going to be families or kids watching it. They aired it before the watershed. And there was like a scene that was quite violent toward the end where they saw like a shootout in a sort of school bathroom or showers or something. There's a bit of bloody residue. And I was like taken aback, exactly who is this movie even marketed to?
Well, I mean, Last Action Hero is kind of a bit insulting, really, because there's that scene with its 15 rating, because I was on an impression to begin with it was a 12, but there's that scene where Danny, the kid, or I think it's called Danny, speaks to Arnie's Jack Slater character and holds up a film sign to him and says, "Say this word, kid grub. Go on, say it." You can't. You can't say it because this movie's only PG-13. It's like, well, that was about as much. Well, that's gone all moot then, really, hasn't it? So it's kind of like adding insult to injury.
I thought that scene was hilarious because it's sort of mocking the censors. I think The Simpsons does it a lot. I always love scenes like that, that sort of mock the senses of their own game. And there was even another scene that I was always a bit miffed by because it looked like a kid's film. And I only seen this film just last year, by the way. There was like a brief moment of animation in the live action, say, like Roger Rabbit, and it was like a talking cat voiced by Danny DeVito. And I was like, did Furman realize that this movie was not going to be intended for just teenagers? I don't know. Maybe Mary Whitehouse people got on his ear and said, if it's an Arnie film, you got to be hard on it. So I had a Rob Bavister moment, and I thought they really were a bit too harsh on this one. I don't always say that about 15 films, but there are instances where I do, like Frost Nixon and Krampus, Last Action Hero, even Matrix, and yeah, whatchamacallit. Yeah.
Yeah, I get. What's something I wanted to say about Die Hard with a Vengeance? Is it is a good film, but good God, Jeremy Irons is no Alan Rickman.
No, I mean, that was never going to happen.
I mean, Jeremy Irons is good in his own way and everything, but he's no Alan Rickman, and he just really did not play the snarky German, suave and sophisticated villain as well as Alan Rickman just played with such ease in freaking the first Die Hard. I also want to bring up that the first time I ever saw Die Hard was on TV, but of course it was the TV edit that had been recorded and everything. So of course it had all the swearing and most of the violent scenes actually is completely cut out. In fact, to the best of my memory, I think it was only 2 or 3 uses of the word "fuck" that were actually left in. So I mean, there's a bit where he goes "Yippee-ki-yay, Kimosabi." It's like, what the fuck? That was stupid.
Wait, and they aired this after the Watershed, right? Or before Watershed?
I'm assuming after the Watershed. It was HTV. They'd air it after the Watershed anyway, even though I don't know if they'd butchered it or if American networks TV networks had already butchered it and they'd just taken it over from there. But when I watched it again a few years later when we actually had it on video in its proper version, and it was like I was watching a totally different film. It's like, fucking hell. Because, I mean, if you watched the first film, the version I watched, you'd think, like, John McClane was the only person who ever swore, or at least only said the F-bomb or anything. Ooh, no, that's not the case.
I hate it when they do TV edits of films. They sometimes call them in-flight versions as well when you're on a plane, but I really don't like those. And you always see, because I've lived in America for some time, but hopefully that won't be happening if Trump wins. But another side point, it does throw you off a bit because they not only do it with PG-13 films from the past, but they also do it with a lot of rated R films. They even did it with Showgirls, and that is certainly not a film you can show on TV unadulterated. And it just takes me out of my element a bit. Like, why would you want to watch Pulp Fiction with all the swearing and the drugs cut out? It just wouldn't be Pulp Fiction. It would be crap fiction.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, we've said our pieces on the RoboCop edited TV version with the freaking airhead and your client's a crumb bag and which one was the other one again? Just trying. Your company built the freaky thing. Now I've got it destroyed. I don't have time for this baloney.
Well, you certainly had it unluckier than even me because I got to see, let's say, for instance, like Men in Black, uncut in the cinema and with VHS, because I've seen the TV edits of that particular film, and there's the bits where they say shit, they replace it with, for instance, what are you doing discharging weapons in the public? We ain't got no time for this nonsense. Nonsense being a substitute for bullshit. And it just takes you out of your element, really. And the fact that they even did it with a PG film or PG-13 means I just can't watch American television, or at least on channels that do advertising, like HBO and stuff, or Netflix. You don't have to worry about that. But then
Yeah,
again,
so
you do, because
it
they,
really
you know,
does
what?
take you out of it. Yeah, like when you hear some hardened criminal use some sort of like term like boulder dash or something, which like you expect some little old granny, little granddad, middle class granddad to say and everything when he's just accidentally stubbed his toe or something. I mean, again, I bring up RoboCop when he makes his first appearance and he's attacking that sorry, wasn't it? Attacking that guy who's robbing that petrol station or that the convenience store, and the guy just goes, "Why me? Why me?" Well, he's actually saying "fuck me, fuck me, fuck me," but just "why me?" It's like, when the hell do you hear a hardened criminal talk like that? And another time when someone just drops all this metal on top of RoboCop and it says, "Die, you bastard!" And they go, "Die, you blackguard!" It's like, blackguard? What is he, a pirate now? It's like, fucking hell, man! It is just beyond unrealistic, and it's hard to take
No,
it
but
seriously.
it really is. The only time where I can think of where they were creative with the profanity because of censorship and to get a certain rating was with Austin Powers and Goldmember and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where there's that scene in Scott Pilgrim where the Aubrey Plaza lady starts saying, "Can I fucking help you? Fucking this, fucking that." Well, they bleeped out all the F bombs, obviously, because it's 12A. But they were very creative with it and quite self-aware. And then Goldmember done like some sort of wordplay where he says, "Eat shit." No, he actually meant eat some shiitake mushrooms. That's
That
the
was
only
quite
time where
funny,
that sort of
actually.
thing worked.
Yeah, well, that was funny. That was funny.
Well, in all fairness, but Goldmember, that's not an action movie. It's a spy movie. That's certainly one of the more ruder movies I saw when I was growing up. Because I did see it at the time because 12 was still restricted, and I didn't quite catch on with it like I did with
Was it?
Spider-Man.
No, time was Goldmember at time when and 12 was still restricted.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Like, oh yeah, it was. Jeez, man,
it was
when did that come out again? I know it came out in
oh
2002,
02.
but I just don't remember exactly when. Oh, 15th of July. Oh, it was just before. I keep
Yeah,
forgetting it was we're more than halfway through 2002 when 12A finally came in. Yeah, good. Don't drag their heels a bit.
I mean, when I look at all these films, like, had the opportunity to see or I couldn't see, there was that part of me that feels like if I grew up in Canada, Australia, or yes, I'm going to say it, United States, I probably would have seen these films, with my parent under the age, because I wouldn't have that fear in my head that I was going to be arrested or kicked out of the screening just because I was underage going to see it. But because I was always with my parent going to films and stuff, that fear would have sort of just gone away a little bit, if you know what I mean. I'm sure you had that feeling as well because you probably were like, well, how come under 17s can go with a parent, but in this country I can't even do that?
Well, I didn't know at the time that that's how the American rating system worked. I wasn't even aware at the time that America even had its own separate rating system. When I was a kid growing up, I saw these age ratings on our films. I just thought that was like the universal standard around the world. It wasn't until like I started realizing later on that every other country in the world has its own rating system and that's unique to that country, which made me start to question, well, if they're all different all over the world, then they're all naturally quite arbitrary, which makes them all a bit meaningless, really. But I digress because there's something else I wanted to actually get on. There's another one film I wanted to bring up because early on in this podcast I mentioned Under Siege.
Yes.
Yeah.
Me and Gavin Self were talking about it on the podcast.
Well, anyhow, the Did you? All right. Oh yeah, I think I have listened to that podcast, but I can't remember when. Anyway, the sequel, Under Siege 2. Well, whereas that one was an 18, it was still cut for its 18 rating, and it was quite a lot that was cut out. It's like, geez, it gives you an idea of just how freaking of just how zealous Furman was, because I mean, it cut out some use of knives. They cut out any sort of instructional stuff that might have been shown when making his bomb. And of course, when they were using the red hot poker scene with the on the eyes, they had to like cut out the bit where Travis Dane talks about the what it does to the actual eyes. Like, fucking hell! It's uncut now, but it's just so ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like they were just doing it deliberately to embarrass us in front of the rest of the world. It's so.
Well, I know I'm always nostalgic about the past, but there are times where I do feel like they went a bit overboard there, because in Canada or US they didn't have this problem. You could watch it as it was intended, although there's that issue of they had to cut it down to avoid an NC-17 or X. But ultimately, you could get an unrated version depending on where you look. In Britain, we just did not have that option, which is probably explains why my father went to go to the US to get Clockwork Orange and Natural Born Killers on VHS. But that's another story, as far as I can tell you. I know when I brought up Casino Royale, I forgot to bring up License to Kill, which that is, like Casino Royale, a Bond film that certainly earned its 15. And they even had to cut it just to get it to 15 when it originally came out. And that just made me scratch my head a bit. Because when I saw License to Kill ultimately, it was in the US and it had a PG-13 on the back of the DVD, the library.
It was cut.
And it was actually the uncut version. They must have made a mistake or typo, because
they didn't care. They don't actually have to have it rated for video for by the MPAA, so they can just throw the completely uncut version and then just put the rating it had on the at the theater, the cinema.
This is true. Having seen the scenes in isolation on YouTube, and then I saw that supposedly accidental uncut version that should have been the cut version, but actually wasn't. It did throw you off a little bit, like seeing people's heads exploding and someone being minced. Oh, that was quite gruesome. I don't know, when you saw License to Kill, did that movie give you nightmares, or did you thought?
I've seen it a few times. I saw it a few times growing up. No, not really. I mean, I watched it with family and everything, so I was able to absorb, process it and everything. I mean, I knew it was a Bond film, and there's like Bond films you expect a level of violence. I mean, it's probably more violent than most other Bond films, but I'd seen a few action movies myself growing up, and we understand the bad guys do bad things, and that's what justifies them being killed by the good guy. So, I mean, well, it didn't give me nightmares, no, because, I mean, these films didn't really do that. I mean, I know I've said, like, RoboCop's unnerved me a bit as a kid. It didn't give me nightmares kind of thing, because I don't think it did.
Well, I know you said you had nightmares, and I can cut this out if you want, so you don't be embarrassed. But you had nightmares with Terminator 2 because of the asylum, hospital.
No. I said, yeah, it did scare me whilst watching it because of Sarah Connor's scenes in the hospital. But it didn't give me nightmares. I scared me at the time and reflected it. But it didn't really go into my dreams or anything. Weirdly enough, it didn't. I don't know why, but it just didn't.
Well, thankfully that shows you're a lot more stable than I am. Hey, if you like, just this once, please do mock me or tease me about why I'm so freaked out over certain films. Just do it right now. I want to hear your spiel.
Mark, my sense of empathy stops me from doing that, as does my sense of second-hand embarrassment. Seriously, man, if I even started to try and mock you for things I require mocking for, that's just a genie that will never go back and get in the the lab. That's like opening just this jar full of hornets, which I won't be able to get back in, and just it'll be all Pandora's box. And I'm running out of metaphors here. I mean, I can't do it, Mark. I just can't. It goes against my
But here's what we can do. When the election comes on the 4th of July, yes, there's going to be an election between Sunak and Starmer, and very likely Sunak will lose badly. We'll go to the polls. Yeah. You dress up as Silas, and I dress up as a evil mutant with invisible arms. Piss take.
Evil mutant with invisible arms?
Elfin. That's what I'm referring to.
Oh, right. Okay.
Silas is the albino man that whips himself.
I know who Silas is. I've read the Da Vinci Code, let alone watched it.
I'll stop. But it does go back to a point I was going to make earlier on, but I didn't want to, where I know people say 18 films and stuff, but in all fairness, the films that fucked me over, be it violence or sex, were the 15 and the 12 and the PG stuff. I never really had the sort of trauma from an 18 film because I didn't really watch them growing up. I watched them quite late in my life. And with 18, you just assume that because it's adult, it's got that big scary red circle. You think danger, danger, not to touch it. But with, PG or 15 and 12, it's a bit of a grey area. You don't exactly know what you might be getting because they're the middle ratings. Do you agree with me on this assessment? Because having talked to you for all these podcasts and my reactions to certain films, you probably are sensing that films at the sort of middle ratings did a number on me more so than like the 18 stuff. Sometimes even
because people go into the films with the ratings, they have certain expectancies and everything, which is why, of course, something's rated 18, you're already kind of like, it's almost like it's giving you a trigger warning, as it would say. People don't like the term trigger warning, but that's what it is. Now, to be fair, I think we should start seeing the 15 that way as well. I've really got the idea we have to view the 15 like America views the R rating. I don't really want to treat the 18 like America treats the NC-17. I want to do it the other way around. But unfortunately, America seems to be one making the films, and we kind of have to just play by their rules. 12A is our PG-13. That means 15 is our R rating. Just the way it is. So, I mean, yeah, if you go into a 12A / PG-13, you're going to be quite surprised by how strong it can be at times. And not to mention, of course, they're going to show you violent stuff, but of course they're going to they're also not going to show too much, which means more stuff might be left to the imagination, and that kind of stuff can be harsher.
I would agree with that assessment. Having seen a lot of films in my lifetime, well, I'll put it this way, in terms of advertising, it certainly did a number on my head. Because, the mass market, those ads for road safety, they're much more scarier than any horror film like Saw or Hostel could ever be. And yes, even though it's not gruesome and grisly like Saw and Hostel, it's on a psychological level and probably visually disturbing. And that's what probably affected me a little bit more than others. But that's why, partly I do these podcasts, is because I like to see people's trauma and what make them tick. That's what intrigues me. And sometimes when you least expect it, that's what intrigues me even more, is when you find the more disturbing or erotic moment when you least expect it.
I mean, that's kind HMV. Fair enough. Bearing in mind, it's a little off topic because we've got to talk about we're talking about action movies.
My bad. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
That's all right. You've got it. Well, as long as you got it out of the way, because you know how I mentioned back in early on this podcast, how during Furman's ears it was quite hard for an R-rated action movie to get an uncut 15.
Yes.
Well, of course, I just thought of a trilogy of films that buck that trend, of course, and they're really good action comedy films, and I've enjoyed them. Although the third one's a bit crap, but I mean, yeah, it's not too bad, I guess, as bad as everyone's making out to be, of course. And I don't know if you've seen them all, but if you haven't, you need to see them, at least the first two, because they are very good fun. Beverly Hills Cop.
I am aware he did bring that up on an interview they did with Barry Norman, like film 92, film 80 something, and he did use that film within the context of, drip by drip, they're putting more violence and language in 15 films. That was a concern for him. But I'm assuming he probably passed it at 15 because it is quite lighthearted, and probably because it's not so focused on the violence as much as it is on bad language.
Well, the
But
comedic tone of a film does kind of reduce the impact of the movie. And while there is quite a bit of shootings out there, I think the shootings are mostly due to the action movies at action scenes at the end, which, of course, I don't suppose you see a huge amount of detail. You see enough detail, enough impacts to like keep the film firmly out of the grasp of 12 or PG-13. Don't get me wrong, and of course, the amount of swearing in it is just going to prevent it from having that rating anyway. And of course, the first one involves a strip club with scene with titties in it and everything. So that's that. But I mean, for film, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's mild. I always saw it, got it mixed up with the Lethal Weapon films. I realized, oh no, the Lethal Weapon films are much stronger than this. And while the Lethal Weapon films are 15s now, and that's cool. Well, the Lethal Weapon 3 was an uncut 15 at the time, which, but then again, that is the mildest of the four. But that just goes to show how many one it was. Yeah, they were not 15, at least uncut 15s when they first came out, and yeah, they were much stronger.
well, we'll bring up on Lethal Weapon. I would presume with number 3 because they put Joe Pesci in it. The tone got more lighthearted and more silly.
He was in number 2 he was in the second one as well.
And then Lethal Weapon 4, that was sort of end days of feminism. It was Robin Duvall who was in charge. So he probably a little bit more relaxed.
I think it came out in 1998. When did it go out? Yeah, 1998. So we were still having to deal with Furman. So that's why it had to be cut down for its 15 rating. Whether or not Robin Duvall would have actually given it an uncut 15 is a matter unto itself. I'm not too sure he would have, because he gave a few 18s to movies which are now okay at 15, like Snatch, Training Day, and Fight Club. So yeah, but they definitely came off in leaps and bounds and everything, nonetheless. Because again, I bring up Bad Boys 2 versus Bad Boys, and there's such a difference. It's unbelievable.
Well, you got a point there. I don't agree with the Fight Club reclassification. I could go on about that one, but I'm not going to. It removes the nostalgia out of it, because that was a movie that was deemed violent, dangerous, and prone to cause terrorism with antisocial behavior. And you had people in schools and stuff trying to replicate Fight Club type activity, and they got in trouble with headmasters and the police. So the fact that that film was re-rated 15, despite being 18 for so long, and the sort of taboo surrounding that movie, it does kind of throw me off a little bit. It'd be like if Pulp Fiction was a 15. I'll be like, what? Let me bring up Lethal Weapon 2 for a quick moment. Not so much on a ratings issue, but on a political issue. I'm actually surprised Hollywood let a film like that pass, because it deals openly with anti-apartheid activism. Danny Glover is very much a left-wing person and an activist in real life. Mel Gibson, well, he's obviously conservative and he's anti-Semitic and a whole bunch of other things. But I always thought that was a little bit strange, seeing Lethal Weapon 2 with how vocal the movie is.
It's quite strange. Well, I mean, obviously, dunking on the South Africans apartheid wasn't exactly that new at the time being. Most people were doing it. I mean, it's not surprising considering it was the regime they had in place there. So yeah, it's quite surprising when you see Danny Glover and Mel Gibson being partnered up, considering the two people are revealed completely different. I mean, there's say Danny Glover's big civil rights supporter, whereas freaking Mel Gibson's practically just a freaking Nazi. I mean, second.
Well, I know you're going to hate me for saying this, but
I'm not. Well, to be honest, I'm going to have to get back to what I was saying. So yeah, I mean, that's neither here nor there right now. But in the case of Fight Club, I mean, I watched it and there's everything, and it's like, I don't think this required an 18. I mean, consider it was cut originally for its 18 and release here because of a punching scene. When I started to look at it a bit recently, it's like, okay, when they released it uncut, so that's fine. I was like, nah, this could fit the mold as being a downgrade to a 15. As far as I'm concerned, every time an 18 gets dropped to a 15, I'm just seeing them as correcting past mistakes.
Well, there are times where I think it's well earned. I mean, Lethal Weapon, those being originally 18s, I do look at them and think maybe they were a bit harsh on that. But there are some films where you open up Pandora's box, you can't turn back the tide. And it does scare me a little bit because partly nostalgia and then partly there's a lot of fear and taboo surrounding those particular titles when they came out that to see it now being rated 15 kind of takes me out of my element a little bit, especially when you consider how mild or blood-free some of the 15 and 18 films were back then compared to now. It's way too complicated. It messes with my head a little bit. And it's like trying to play catch up. So that's one of the reasons why reclassifying films, at least at the 15-18 level, it kind of confuses me a little bit. Now with PG to 12, that makes me angry a little bit because those are films. If they were 12 at the time, I would not have been able to see them as much. And if Men in Black and Small Soldiers were 12s on Mask, I would have been crying. I would have been like, why can't I say it? Where?
Well, Toy Soldiers, maybe. No, wait, Toys. Oh, Small Soldiers, yeah. Sorry, for a minute I thought Toy Story for a second, but fucking hell, I'm completely messed up. Small. I think it's a matter of time before Small Soldiers becomes a 12. I mean, what was the film? Fifth Element. That's an action movie, of course. That was PG-13 America. Got away with a PG here. Wish I'd seen that when it came out actually, because I did because it's actually a really cool film. That's been bumped up to a 12, and flipping heck, it's did show how much they were willing to let go at PG back then. I don't know where I was going with that, actually, but
I will bring up one film that came to mind. That is an action film, but it's foreign, and because it's foreign or sort of art house, they got to get away with quite a few things than if a regular American English-speaking film could. There's that class snobbery that Furman was practicing. It was a French film called Doberman. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it, but take my word for it, it's one of the better French action films out there, aside from Bonne les Trois, which at
what's it called
15 is
again?
kind of mild. Well, it's Doberman, and it's an 18 film and well earned. I mean, there was a really disturbing and horrible scene involving a man's face being slammed on the tarmac as the car's driving, and they slam his face onto like the road works or tarmac, and quite gruesome and bloody. And there's quite graphic detail in the aftermath of the man's face being gored, or like partly quite graphically disfigured as he was put onto the tarmac, and he's screaming and yelling like ah, ah. I'll send you an isolated clip of it later on, but
fine.
I
can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's fine. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't mind watching that.
And they were threatening to censor it under Thurman, but they didn't because it was French or it's art house, tartan, metro tartan, so it was going to put as big people as much as like commando and stuff per se. So there were times where he did slip up. And don't get me started on Crash. But that's
Well,
not.
I mean, I've only seen Crash once, and I don't think. Wait, what? Is there times that he slipped? Wait a minute. What did you say? There was times that he slipped up?
Yeah, like, everyone says, oh, he's very harsh. But there were times where he slipped up at 18, and Doberman comes to the mind, which is that tarmac scene where he puts a man's face on the road and there's blood everywhere and gore.
Okay,
And then
well,
Man Bites Dog and Crash are a few that come to my mind.
right, but he didn't slip up with those ones because he let them go through uncut. So he did a good thing with that. There was times when he was a bit cooler than we may have given him credit for, other than whereas in most of the times he was actually like a complete twat and a complete square by not being very liberal. Of course, it certainly reminds me because there were times when there's one political director who had some issues with censorship or basically ratings discrepancy, everything. And of course, I'm talking about John Woo.
Oh, I'm familiar with that man. Quite
Pardon?
familiar. I'm familiar with his issues trying to get hard target. He's got an X for NC-17, but they had to down it to R. But in the UK, they didn't tamper with it as much as the
I don't
Americans.
think they did. I don't think they tampered it. I think basically it only had to be cut down for R just in America, but everywhere else got the completely uncut version. And that was my first ever John Woo film I ever saw. And I did think some elements of it were quite sick and everything, but nonetheless, I did think it was fucking awesome because, oh boy, I love those fucking. I just love those old school action films, and this was just classic, just a brilliant fucking. It wasn't X, it was NC-17, by the way, which was 1993. But it's semantics. It was a completely and utterly awesome. I mean, it's a cliched plot line. It's just the most dangerous game plot line in the game, but it's more of just a excuse for Jean-Claude Van Damme to just show off his martial arts skills and everything. And oh god, the action is cool. Well, the plot line is just absolutely crap and everything, and Van Damme's acting is atrocious, but fucking hell, as an action movie, it is awesome. Although have you seen Hard Target, by the way?
Isolated clips online. The John Woo film I like is Hard Boiled.
We can get onto that. Well, we can get on that into a minute, dude. But I wouldn't mind. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't really go into how I think they wasted a perfectly good fight at the end, but nonetheless, as an introduction to John Woo's movies and just generally that sort of stuff in general. Oh, fucking hell, Hard Target. Because I was 11 when I saw it, and I just thought it was so awesome. Of course, I saw it when I was 11 in 1996. 4 years later, Mission Impossible 2 came out. I remember my brother telling me, "Oh, I know who's directing it." And who? John Woo, Mission Impossible 2, that is. He said, "Who's directing it?" John Woo. It was like, well, what's he directed? He said, Face Off, Broken Arrow, Hard Target. It's like, oh, I've seen Hard Target. That was cool. Awesome. So now I've gone and seen. So then, obviously, I went to go see Mission Impossible 2 at the cinema. Thankfully, it was in 2000. I was 15, although it wasn't my first 15 at the cinema because I've obviously seen South Park and I saw Kevin and Perry go large. Obviously, it was a bit toned down compared to other stuff because whereas our previous films went for the R rating, this time they went for a PG-13. However, I didn't know about PG-13 at the time anyway. Of course, turns out there was something we didn't know. Whereas it was cut down quite heavily for a PG-13 in America. I don't know if it's the rest of the world, but I know in Britain anyway, we pretty much got all the uncut version. So while it was given the equivalent of an R rating here, we actually saw the R-rated version anyway. So that was kind of cool.
That is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard.
Well, it says so on IMDb, and apparently the same applied to the Charlie's Angels film that came out that year as well.
No, it's true. I remember when Charlie's Angels came out, it was like 15 certificate, but it was PG-13 stateside, so I was like, wait, who exactly is this marketed to? And then Full Throttle, years later, that would be a 12A, so I was like, they can't make up their minds, can they?
Well, Full Throttle was kind of a weird thing, because that was cut for a 12A, which is weird because of a headbutt. And we've discussed it on the Imitable Techniques podcast. I don't really want to go into it again. But safe to say, those two issues with the with John Woo films shows that he obviously doesn't really care too much for MPAA ratings, and would only just cut the film just for American release, and would just allow the rest of the world to see the version, the proper version. Of course, we had between a Broken Arrow and Face Off as well. Oh, Broken Arrow was an uncut 15 under Furman. That's weird. Of course, Face Off was not only an 18 but also cut due to the use of knives. But also, you wanted to bring up Hard Boiled as well.
Yes. You know what you're getting with a film like that, because it's an old school 18 film not martial art, but like full blown action and sort of blood squib shots that otherwise probably would have been given the cut under any other circumstances if it had been like an English type of film, but because it was sort of cult oriented and aimed at sort of white men with East Asian fetishes. I know I use that word quite liberally. Lets a lot of stuff slip by. And also, I remember it quite famously because it's the film that helped influence the movie Shoot 'Em Up. Wow, actually, I didn't bring that one up. I will in just a moment. And it also got the man holding the baby on the VHS cover with a shotgun, which always made me laugh. But even though I couldn't see it, I always knew that's the movie with the baby and the shotgun. And then Shoot 'Em Up would... No, Hard Boiled, but Shoot 'Em Up would parody or reference that particular scene from Hard Boiled and make it in, for an hour and 20 minutes of nothing but action, violence, and carnage. I interviewed the filmmaker about this, and it's pretty much the only film that he's known for. But it's an 18, but in some respects, it's really not as much violent as like Deadpool.
True. Deadpool is a superhero film, though. I think that just in that context, they can just let so much more go.
This is true. I think maybe the thing that pushed Shoot 'Em Up to 18 probably is that sexy mix of violence. I know they are a little bit tricky about mixing the two things.
It's also R18 plus in Australia, so I mean, they haven't beaten us with that on that one. So, it's too bombed about. But I believe Hard Boiled, or at least a few of John Woo's Hong Kong stuff was Hong Kong bibliography was cut here, even for its 18 rating.
The Killer and stuff.
Was it the Killer? It could have been. Like I say, I haven't seen any of these things. I really need to see
No, but there's a lot of action films I haven't even seen myself. I look stupid in front of you when it comes to 80s and 90s action films. I mean, I've seen Total Recall and RoboCop and stuff, but compared to you, this is like your genre. This is your expertise.
I mean,
I know I could have gone on about Total Recall, but they had to trim that to avoid an X.
To be honest, I mean, just knowing that with stuff with who the fuck was it again? It's not
Verhoeven.
Paul Verhoeven. Yeah, that's his name, because he had quite a bit of time trying. In fact, it was Hollow Man, released in 2000, which was the first movie he ever released that was cut, that got through with an uncut R rating. Like every other film he's released before, and he just to get avoid an X 2017, he had to keep cutting it down. Or with Showgirls, he just released it uncut with a NC-17. I mean, fair play, fair play, respect for that man for actually, being willing to do it and everything. Because, goddamn, you'd hope they would just buck up and embrace the NC-17, but they won't. And as long as they don't want to do that, I'm going to keep wanting films to pass through with 15 ratings. And of course, Total Recall is now down to a 15, and that is another classic Arnie film. In fact, it reminds me of that. Have you seen the Hot Shots Part 2?
I've never seen Hot Shots. Is it like a piss take at Top Gun?
Well, the first one is, the second one's a piss take out Rambo. Anyway, there's a scene at the end where he's shooting all these bad guys at the end, and a count just starts appearing on the bottom of the screen with a body count, and it just keeps going up and up and up, and it says equal to RoboCop, and it keeps going up and up and up. It goes equal to Total Recall before it just goes up and up and goes bloodiest movie ever. But I mean, obviously, the action movies were Arnie's and Stallone's bread and butter and everything. In fact, Commando came out the same year as First Blood Part 2, and basically it was Arnie's giving a bit of a middle finger to Stallone, because the body count in the last act of Commando is the same as the body count to the entire movie of First Blood Part 2. So that was so that was just him just giving a big middle finger.
Well, I know there was a bit of a rivalry between Schwarzenegger and Stallone, which I find quite funny. It makes for good press, like the Daily Mail and Guardian and stuff. But if you're talking about the two actors, as far as their films are concerned, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Austrian person has the upper hand. I mean, I just don't connect with Rocky. I know a lot of people do. My friend from New Jersey, he's a big fan of the Rocky films. And Rambo, I've only seen like number 4 and number 5. Number 1 actually is quite a tragic movie. A Vietnam veteran.
It's meant to be.
He's got PTSD. And then the sequels, amp up with the violence and just the sheer carnage. And you almost have to wonder, am I watching two different films right here?
That's literally that's been the biggest. Yeah, you've hit the money. Well, yeah, you've completely tapped onto the controversy surrounding the sequels, as they completely abandoned the message of the first one.
Exactly. In all fairness, I'm sure Stallone's probably thinking, I wish it didn't turn out that way, but he's probably laughing all the way at the bank, because those sequels made quite a bit of money. Well, probably not so much number 4 and 5. They probably did well on DVD and home media, because hyper-violent action films like that usually tend to do better business on home media, from what I'm aware of. Schwarzenegger's catalog with his action films and stuff has been a little bit more consistent. And I like his comedies. Twins, that's a great film. Last Action Hero and Kindergarten Cop are pretty good too. Certainly more so than Rambo and Rocky.
Well, it was very obvious that between the rivalry of the two, Arnie never took himself too seriously, and was had a bit more of a tongue-in-cheek attitude, was prepared, had a bit more a sense of humor about it. I mean, Stallone, on the other hand, let his ego get in the way too much. I mean, not in the same way that, say, Steven Seagal would have, but I mean, from what I've been hearing, there are two separate films, both Rambo First Blood Part 2 and then Cliffhanger, where they had to change a film or remove a sequence, edit or remove a sequence from a film, because when they showed that original sequence to test audiences, the test audiences just burst out laughing.
That's a bit weird. I mean, they could have done that with Total Recall 1990, because there's a lot of scenes in that movie that are downright hilarious. Funnier than most of the comedies that are out there. Like that scene where the guy's eyes are bugging out and he looks like Rodney Dangerfield. I almost fell on the floor laughing, and the robot that says, I'll be 18 credits, please. Sue me, dickhead. No!
Well, that was
we have to enjoy the ride.
Mark, that was intentionally funny. They're talking about things that are unintentionally hilarious, like something that Stallone was trying to play completely straight for dramatic purposes, which just caused the test audiences to burst out, just to start pissing themselves laughing.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get what you mean there. Sorry, I sort of misinterpreted there. It's, people said that about Nicolas Cage when he was in that Wicker Man remake, where he's like, not the bees, not the bees.
Well,
And you thought, that's a bit overacting there. They almost came across as a bit humorous.
They might not have shown those to test audiences. They probably don't show every film to test audiences.
Well, whichever way it works. I'm just saying, my opinions on this matter because it makes me laugh there. If you're talking about action film stars in general, I don't really have a favorite one. I mean, you could say Tommy Lee Jones because he was in Small Soldiers and Men in Black, but I've not seen U.S. Marshals, and I've not seen some of the other stuff that he was in. I'm not familiar with Dolph Lundgren or Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff, except for JCVD, which is not even an action film at all. Iko Uwais, The Raid, he can do no wrong as a Pencak Silat martial artist. Jackie Chan, Rush Hour. I think that's a great film. I even love the third one.
Oh, if you wanted to see a great, I watched quite a few old school Jackie Chan films, and of course one of the one his first foray into Hollywood was of course Rumble in the Bronx. And have you seen it?
I know you've told me about it on a podcast before, but that one's one I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that was I can't remember what I was going to say about it now. Yeah, I mean, while the acting in it is horrendously bad because most of the people who star in it aren't actually actors, they're just stuntmen. But Jesus Christ, the action in it is awesome. Just the stunts that Jackie Chan does. There's no stunt doubles, no shaky cam, no quick cuts, no wire fu, no green screen. Everything you see on the freaking screen is what's going on. And it is just fucking glorious and amazing. I mean, the film does end kind of abruptly because there's no sort of conclusion behind it. But as a 90-minute just constant action flick, it is just brilliant. If you ever get a chance to watch it, do. You won't be disappointed.
Who knows? I might give it a try. I mean, I've been trying to revisit martial arts films and the sort from my past. Another movie I always talk about The Raid and Rush Hour, but I almost don't talk about Man with the Iron Fist. I don't know if you've seen it, but trust me, it is one of the best pieces of violence and pornography you'll ever see. And it's an 18 certificate, and it's made by the Wu-Tang Clan frontman RZA. It's great, even though people say it's crap.
Man with the Iron Fist. Oh yeah, I've just looked. Yeah, I've just looked it up. No, I think it was the first I've ever even heard of it.
Well, it sort of came and gone, really, but I remember seeing the marketing and advertising for it. And I was told they actually shown a red band trailer for that film when it said green band, but they showed the red band one by accident with the eye popping out and bloody detail people's arms and stuff being slit off. But it works in many ways. And if you're into anime, you probably will like it as well. It's quite like Afro Samurai, but even with more sex. Now, speaking on sex, do you think a lot of these sort of martial arts films are pretty much aimed at white men with East Asian fetishes, and it's creepy and leery? Because someone said that about Rush Hour 2 and Rush Hour 3 and stuff, and they're always like, yeah, this is for like some creepy white fella who goes to like the Philippines to try to get mail order bride.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it might be a lot of it might be made for weeaboos. Mind you, that said, weeaboos are specifically fetishized Japanese culture, and while I might say they might not be able to tell the difference between Chinese and Japanese culture, I've still got the feeling that no, actually, they probably would, because they'd probably be obsessed enough to actually nitpick the two. I say nitpick, to differentiate between the two. They might be people who just have Asian fetishes. I don't know. I mean, there's always there's always internet tough guys who always like to brag about how they've studied the martial arts, and they've how to master the blade or the nunchucks, and they can know how to kill you with a three single taps to the chest or something. Some which they say comfortably behind the safety of a keyboard, never having to prove their claims. I don't know if it's done for people with a Asian fetish though, but that could just be me.
I know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word because it may have been a little bit racist. But in my time growing up, a lot of the people who I've met who are into sort of martial arts stuff and anime as a whole, they're generally a little bit freaky. And you probably think, oh, Mark's a bit freaky in that respect, but I'm not as familiar with martial arts stuff as probably even you are. And this is coming from someone who likes the Rush Hour and the Raid and Afro Samurai and stuff.
Well, I did used to watch quite a few Bruce Lee films growing up. I say growing up, but when I was 13, I went through a martial arts movie craze. So I watched quite a few Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee films. But I haven't watched them in a while. Most of it was just to watch it and just to see them do their amazing moves and think, God, I wish I could do that. But that's not something. But that's all I've really got to say about that.
No pressure there. I will say this one thing about Enter the Dragon. I'm actually happy that film is now re-rated 15. It being 18, it looks mild.
Very much so.
So I said a Rob Bavister thing. You can be happy about me now.
Well, I'll keep it. Well, good. I'm glad you actually managed to employ a liberal mindset to something. I'm glad you managed to employ a liberal mindset because considering that's almost like getting blood out of a stone. But at least no, you did manage to have a liberal attitude rather than a conservative one. So that's always good.
Well, I got you the last laugh this time, but in all fairness, for the purposes of the podcast, I'm the Daily Mail and you are the Guardian, according to, the people who are reading for Mark versus Rob, in case anyone listens. I'm the reactionary Mail writer. You are the sort of middle class, we've got to be more cultured and more respectful Guardianista. Okay, I'll stop. I know we're sort of pushing our luck a little bit here. We're actually almost 2 hours into this podcast. This is the longest one we have done. I don't know if you have any last thoughts.
Well, to be fair, talk about action movies. We could be here all fucking day, but I know I say that all the time. But I've grown up watching action movies in my life. During the 80s and 90s, could be seen the golden age of those classic R-rated action movies with the over-the-top gunshots and effects and the blood squibs and the overuse and the use of motherfucker or just fuck and just loads of shooting. It's such a shit that had to happen under Furman's tenure, and it couldn't have happened under a more liberal regime. It's just kind of fortunate that we did manage to get quite a few after he had left. Well, we managed to get Bad Boys 2. Although to me, Bad Boys 2 seemed to be the last of those classic R-rated action movies that we then seemed to have a dearth of during the 2000s, at least until Rambo 4 came along. But I've but from John Wick and Olympus Has Fallen and Mad Max Fury Road have started to come back into vogue now, so that's pretty cool. And with a much more liberal BBFC at the helm, we are, I'm always fucking here for it. And that's why it's cool that we can see films like John Wick and Atomic Blonde and everything, and they all get uncut 15s, which is what they're supposed to. And yeah, but obviously everyone likes action movies. It's what, as you're a kid growing up, that's what you tune in just to watch adrenaline rush where you watch shit blow up. I've always found it a bummer that Britain doesn't make more of them. I know we've tried to make a few. We don't like officially. Dread is a British film, as well as films like Welcome to the Punch and whatnot.
No, but you are right. We kind of suck in comparison. The only really claim to action films we've got are spy movies. And this is where Kingsman and License to Kill and Grimsby sort of come in.
Well, you are right. That's why when the James Bond flicks have always been somewhat action movies, so that was kind of cool. It's like Britain's best claim towards action to a sort of action movie world. Obviously, France had the District 13 and its sequel that came out in 04 and 07 or 08 respectively. Or was it 06? I don't know, but the first one came out in 04, the second one came out a few years later. And they were freaking awesome, if only about parkour shit. Also, of course, I wrote my Evil Busters books, which is a series of action based stories, if not a deconstruction of them. So I'm quite pleased with that. So anyway, my favourite action movie is Die Hard. Although my second favourite could be Terminator 2. And having watched that film, I have to say they don't make movies like that anymore. I don't know how many 80s and 90s classic R-rated action movies you've ever watched, Mark, but
well, I wasn't really allowed to watch them growing up. But if you're saying within that perspective, RoboCop would be my favourite, and Darkman. But those are more superhero films.
Yeah, Darkman is quite cool. Cool film.
That's a movie that did not need to be 18. That could have easily been a 15, even almost a 12.
Pretty much. I mean, you are right there. I think they could cut the umbilical cord with that one. But yeah, I guess I've said what I've said. Well, I've said all I can fit into this freaking this podcast. So I guess I guess we've run our course.
Did we forget about Starship Troopers?
Because I was going to mention that. That was an uncut 15. Well, uncut. I mean, the R-rated version was uncut 15 at the cinema here, but bumped up to an 18 in video, as was just the cause of the time. So yeah, they said at the time they thought they made the wrong decision, rating it 15 at the cinema, which is a real bitch thing for them to say. But again, Furman, what are you gonna do?
Well, because upon looking at that film when it came out, obviously I was too young to see it, but it was certainly much more gorier than most 15 films at that time would at least permit. So it always threw me off a little bit. And then, because I always knew it was an 18 film, but when I did get word they did get a 15 in the cinema, I was like, wow, I'm sure some of the people in the audience were in for a rude awakening, because that movie gets quite gory at places. Although, in all fairness, that movie's kind of like a comedy, like a really dark comedy, in my opinion. Because I find myself laughing at how ridiculous and satirical it is. Verhaven was not afraid to sort of poke fun at politics and social structures. He's always done it, but most people sort of miss the point.
Well, that is true. I mean, there's no beating on the bush there. That is very, very true.
But that I could have gone that. We could have talked about Starship Troopers on my politics one last week, but we can only talk about so much and so at little time. But I'm going to leave it uncut as it is, because this is a very engaging podcast for you, and it could have gone on for even like 4 hours. But I'm sure you're probably a bit thirsty and need water at this time. But no.
I was smashing an energy drink throughout the duration of this podcast, but Also, I can't stay for too long. Wait, because I'm eventually at some point I'm going to head off to the to a cinema to watch Fear Road, but that's not for a while.
All right then. Well, you tell me if it earned its 15, because Mad Max Fury Road was quite mild for 15, except for a few bits of blood.
It was a little bit. I'm not going to lie about that. It was a little. It's quite surprising because that was not just 15; it was also R-rated. Anime 15 plus was rated. In fact, they made a big song and dance about its R rating. And of course, while I saw it at cinema, I thought, yeah, there's a good bit. They're not like doing the PG-13 12A of sort of like cutting away when a death happens, or like not letting you see it. They do like, let you feel the full impact. But even when after that impact, it's like, well, you're not really thrown much in our face and everything. But yeah, and no one says fuck. Or at least if only one person says fuck, I don't know. But this IMDb says Furiosa, the violence and gore is severe, so that sounds cool. But I will let you know later on.
Well, do whatever, because I did talk about it when I was at Cannes. Saying why would they allow a popcorn mainstream film to be with a bunch of upper class snobby dramas that have Julia Roberts in it? So hopefully that clip of me talking on France 24 goes viral, in case if anyone asks.
Well, we'll soon see. Okay,
But nevertheless, I'm happy to have had this discussion with you. Heaven knows what podcast would come up next, because I've ran out of ideas entirely.
I'm getting a little bit I'm trying to I'm running out of ideas as well, but we can always but we'll come up with something in the interim. I certainly will.
Oh, I'm sure of that then. And if you let too many films at 15, it'll make kids still already more enough desensitized. The fact that more and more 14 and 13-year-olds already know what cream pies are, and stabbing someone with a knife and disemboweling them, that just really upsets me. But unfortunately, that's the reality that we live in. So unfortunately, I can't change the world. Until then, peace. And also, vote green.
Right. Well, just vote on the 4th of July anyway, just to make sure we get make sure we get as many votes counted. But yeah,